So, what's going on there?
That's me playing a clarinet and half a clarinet in 1987.
I thought it was a bong for a minute then.
Twin bongs.
Yeah.
Yeah. This might be really distracting, but I thought we'd better have something in the background of different things.
Yeah. So we said we'd talk about when 808 State started. How did you guys get together?
Yeah, well, we got together over this project, which was called Hit Squad MCR. If we go back to 1987, I'm working in a clothes shop in a cafe on Oldham Street called Central Clothing. And I'm in the sandwich bunker downstairs, which is kitted out with like a vast selection of vinyl, and it's quite noisy down there. We've introduced the Manchester to the pita bread sandwich, which was quite revolutionary at the time, and milkshakes and a real coffee machine, which was quite a rare thing in Manchester at the time. You know, we were quite progressive. And across the road was Eastern Bloc Records, and the lads from Eastern Bloc used to come in and sometimes bring me presents of records. And, you know, we got chatting. He knew that I was in this group called Biting Tongues. We'd been going about 10 years almost by that point. Biting Tongues was a bit of an institution in Manchester music, you know. I don't know how much to go into Biting Tongues at this point, but other than the fact that I'd been immersed in music for 10 years.
Yeah. What music? Was it John Berry that was bringing stuff over?
Mostly Martin was my connection that I made.
What was he bringing over to you? What type of music?
At the time, I was quite into the Anya Sound thing. Adrian Sherwood's records, you know, things like Fats Comet and Tackhead. And Eastern Bloc was pretty good for all that stuff. And then stuff like Gherkin Jerks and Larry Heard stuff and, you know, early Chicago and Detroit stuff, you know. So I was already going clubbing quite a bit in Manchester in terms of being in Biting Tongues. We were on Factory Records, so you got a free Hacienda card. Plus Colin from Biting Tongues, he worked at the Hacienda, so you know he was always there working kind of thing. So, and we played there as well. We did Battle of the Bands on a Tuesday night and came third.
Oh, I didn't know that. Was that when the Happy Mondays came last?
I think we were on with the Rhythmaires, which were a rockabilly band.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of rockabilly in Eastern Bloc, and the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah,
that's how I know it at first. It was more alternative, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a whole vibe of that kind of retro thing in Affleck's Palace, you would say. You know, old 50s clothes and all that kind of thing. It was de rigueur in the 80s to, you know, be 1950s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, but you know, Biting Tongues would be doing faux Moroccan sort of Gnawa music with funk bass and all that. You know, we were quite influenced by stuff that was going on in New York. I really liked all this harmo melodic stuff, James Blood Ulmer, Decoding Society. You know, and this was really 80s music that kind of gets forgotten. Ornette Coleman's music and weird melodies, you know, and you'll hear that a lot in the Biting Tongues music, and then and then we just superimpose it over some of the acid house stuff later as well. You know, it's like yes, it was a weird time of different music, you know.
Martin Price was a character, wasn't he?
Indeed, yes, he was many characters. That's what I think. You know, depending on the day of the week or whatever, you know. And my memories of him is that he was an incredibly generous person. You know, he'd give you the shirt off his back, and often did. You know, it's certainly. I've got his Travel Fox trainers up in my loft, you know, and they were like highly prized at the time to sort of get them. And he was like, "Oh, have them," you know. It was sort of like. he was evangelical about music, and if he was in a bad mood, you could get on the wrong side of him going in the shop. Many people were frightened to deal with him in the shop, you know. Yeah. And yeah, I saw that in action sometimes. You know, he was just really passionate about music, and he was really opinionated about music. But that just goes with the territory. If you're going to run a record shop, you better be into it, and he certainly was, you know. But they were an interesting group, the whole of them, you know. They had this weird co-op, like a housing co-op in Bolton, where they used to go to the cash and carry and buy, you know, insane amounts of rice, and then sort of, you know, they had ways of living cheaply by being this co-op thing. And then they were building houses in Bolton, you know, behind this housing co-op, and that's the title of the first album, Newbuild.
Oh, is that where it came from?
Yeah, because like they kept going on about, the Newbuild, we're nearly ready with the Newbuild, you know, and I just thought that's a really good name for an album. You know,
my introduction to buying inputs was spinning records, and then it was like buying hip hop there, and then I started buying house, and then the lads Kenny and Russ were really cool, weren't they, and laid back. And then when we went to Eastern Bloc, Martin was absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I found it the other way around. I found spinning really intimidating.
I mean, just like he'd say hilarious things as you buy records off.
Yeah, he was pretty random, yeah. And, you know, and anyway, he had this idea that he should start a record label. And there's all these kids coming in the shops with tapes all the time, mostly hip-hop stuff. For instance, one of the groups was A Guy Called Gerald with MC Tunes. They were called the Scratch Beat Masters.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they'd recorded one track already at the kitchen with Jamie, who ran the kitchen in Hume. And we were to kind of re-record it and kind of try and make a better quality one. I must say, at the time, of working in the cafe, there's this guy who we knew called Ivan, who came in and said, just started this course at Spirit round the corner, doing sound engineering. And he's like, I should come and have a look. So I went and had a look, and I got sold on the idea, and I joined the course back in 87. And, no, 86, I think, even. Anyway, so I did this sound engineering course. So then Martin used to bring these lads to me to be recorded. And sometimes they'd pay for it. And sometimes I'd blag time. And sometimes we'd go in there at night, because I used to get the keys as the caretaker sometimes, yeah. The guy I took over that position from was Danny Spencer of Candy Flip.
All right.
Yeah. Now, he was really into the technology. You know, he was a bit of a whiz kid on the tech, and he largely taught me more than the course did. The guy that was teaching the course was Tim Oliver, and he did a lot of records in Manchester. You know, trying to think, Fifth of Heaven records, ACR records. He was the go-to engineer in Manchester in that period, kind of thing. And as I progressed on the course, if he was ever ill, or you know, he needed filling in, he'd hand me a job. So the first job I got was man from Del Monte.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
A studio called Out of the Blue Studios.
Yeah.
And you know, that was my first job flying a proper desk. You know. But Spirit, the recording studios, we got all kinds of bands in there. Indie bands, you know, electro soul bands. Fifth of Heaven really stuck in my mind because they had some good gear. You know, they had like these posh synths, and Denise Johnson was a singer in that. And you know, we made a lot of records with this guy called Barrington Stewart and his brother Lawrence. They almost coached a lot of the singers in Manchester. They all came from this church. I found this out at Barrington's funeral. He died in about over 10 years ago now. And we all went to his funeral, and everyone who'd grown up in singing in this church, and all the musicians, like Mikey Wilson, the drummer, and Sylvan, the bass player, and they all went through this one music coach at the church in Whalley Range. So that was like an amazing sort of school for musicians, you know. But Barrington, he coached all these singers, so we'd be doing sessions with like Melanie Williams and Joe Roberts. They had like a publishing deal. So every day was different down in that basement on Tariff Street. If you go down now, it's the bogs in Cosmonaut.
I was saying before, I had a look on ChatGPT. I was coming down and said, like, give me a deep search on Spirit Studios. And it said, like, Manchester bands came from there, and quirky bands like 808 State.
Still quirky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty quirky, yeah.
I think the first Acid House track I heard by a Manchester band was and Martin blew me away. He played me Flow Coma, and I just couldn't believe that was being done in our city.
Yeah. So we were doing, like, again, this is that hip hop record we made. If you listen to it now, it's really awful. I'm going to play it later, actually, after this, just to prove where we were up to at that point. It was quite a stiff learning curve. But at these gigs, at the end, we had all the gear. Well, Gerald had, you know, his 808 drum machine and a 101 and 303, all that gear. So at the end of the hip-hop sessions, we'd do Acid House at the end of these things. And it was a cultural clash that at the time. All the hip-hop lads had rules and regulations, you know. There were certain ways of dressing, certain codes of behaving, and, you know, it was a world I didn't feel very comfortable in. But, you know, we got on with it. You know, I was largely doing sound engineering on these things, you know. But we'd have people like the Ruthless Rap Assassins on. They were brilliant, really a cut above everything that was going on at the time, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy that they never made it, isn't it? Because they were so good.
Yeah, they had star quality, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, so, you know, we'd come on with the Acid House at the end and really jam out and, like, put effects on everything, you know. There was these effects boxes back then called SPX 90, and we had about 3 of them at the Boardwalk kind of thing, and just threw it on everything, you know, sort of harmonised everything and just go absolutely crazy. I'll play a bit of that afterwards as well.
So someone put on my Facebook a photograph of their copy of Newbuild, and I forgot it had a little sticker on some of them, like featuring A Guy Called Gerald.
Yeah, and that was a Martin move, definitely, yeah.
Was it Martin that did that, yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was in retail, wasn't he? You know, he's like, we got, like, the deal was something like Southern Records will give you, you know, they press up your record and, you know, you get a very small advance to sort of do the artwork and all that kind of thing. But he was connected to all the music biz, you know, the record sales people. There was a guy called, what we called him Fat Ron, but Ron Atkinson, and he said, like, well, that sounds like a manager.
Wasn't the Ron Atkinson, was it?
No, it was Ron Atkinson that ran Music Mania in, I think the shop was in Altrincham. Yeah. And he had this white van, and he did all the imports around the Northwest. So he was Martin's man for Chicago and Detroit stuff, and, you know, he was an important kind of importer. Yeah. So, yeah, he became our manager quite early on.
Did Newbuild sell well at first?
I've no idea. You honestly don't know how many it sold. You know what I mean? Don't know how many they pressed. Even, you know what I mean? It was so early days, and yeah, I don't know.
It's like it was Pacific State.
I think there was 2 original pressings of it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you find the Reflex version, which was like when Reflex, Aphex Twins label, took it up in 1999, and they pressed each track on a whole side of vinyl, so it became a triple album.
Yeah, it was like when Pacific State, that was the one that really blew it all up.
Yeah, well, see, that was a little bit later, because that became on an EP called Quadrastate.
Yeah.
And that was almost a transitional period. I see like the first period with Gerald was Newbuild, but then there's a second LP called Pre-Build, where there's tracks that were sort of recorded but never put out. And then I found this cassette of Gerald's Attic stuff, kind of thing. I only made this tape for the guys in Autechre who were saying, "Oh, you must have, why are you doing this pop stuff?" Meaning, this is about 1994 or something. And you might have done a record with UB40, which was like they were like sort of like, "What are you doing all that for?" and lauding the early stuff, So I put together this tape for them, and then it started doing the rounds with all the Warp lot or whatever, and then Reflex put it out.
I forgot when I did the video with Anif. I forgot that Gerald was Housemaster G, wasn't he, for a while?
I didn't know him as that.
Yeah.
When was he that?
Well, he says in the video, and I vaguely remember this, that Voodoo Ray was an instrumental at first, and it was Housemaster G, and Stu Allen played it.
Yeah.
And Anif's story was that he cycled down to Piccadilly Radio in knots, and he had to get hold of Housemaster G, and there was a cassette with his phone number on, and then he rang him, and then that's
when he got the moniker A Guy Called Gerald. This is from A Guy Called Gerald.
Yeah, and then like Anif said that he put the vocal on it, and all the vocal was his idea.
Yeah.
But he was originally Housemaster G.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. Yeah. That sounds hip hop enough. Yeah. Yeah. But he had this. There was this. I lived in Rusholme at this time, in about 88, 89, and on Dickinson Road in Rusholme. And Gerald was on Claremont Road, still at his mum's, and up in the attic, he had this amazing kind of sound system up there, and it looked pretty home built. I think he, had, got the hammer and nails out and made these bass bins and everything, And it was pretty quaky up there, And his mum used to bring up pizzas, and there'd be like, 12 of us up there all jamming away or messing about. And
he worked at McDonald's, didn't he?
Yeah, and Rap Assassins, you could look out the window and the Rap Assassins would live, they were literally across the road, and then MC Tunes was literally around the corner. And there was always like weird parties going on there, and they'd play all the running joke was every time there was a party you had to get through the entire electro box set, the Street Sounds electro box set. It was compulsory to play it from beginning to end, kind of thing. And Tunes was lived at his mum's house at that point. Yeah, and I remember she'd done a massive mural of Marilyn Monroe on the wall, kind of thing. And I got my trainers nicked from. You had to take your shoes off before you went in, and I had to walk back to Dickinson Road with no shoes because somebody. Rush home, what are you going to do? I
did a video with Drew Ellis and Andy E from Eastern Bloc recently.
Yeah.
And he told me about his interview from Eastern Bloc. So he said basically he knew he had the job, but Martin Price said to him, "If you saw an old lady collapsed on the road, what would you do?" And then he said, "Oh, I'd go over and steal a purse." He said, "You've got the job."
Yeah, they're a pretty anarchistic mob,
Yeah.
And every one of them was a huge character. It wasn't just Martin, There was it was a soap opera every day in the shop. And the offices were I'd say the offices. They had this basement where they did the mail order from, and you had to there's an alleyway if you look down the side of Affleck's, and we used to call it Pisser's Alley because it just used to stink of urine every time you went down there, kind of thing. But in the basement kind of thing, they used to put on parties down there quite early on, and it was like a health and safety nightmare. It's just sort of like a bit of ultraviolet, couple of red bulbs, and it was like a maze down there. It just the ceiling was this low, and it just filled it full of smoke, and all you could see was like eyeballs and teeth. It was like. Quite, you felt it was quite scary, but it was quite pumping as well. They had some really good parties, But also, we used to do parties. There was a guy called Keith Roadrider, we knew him as. And Keith Horton is his name. But he had a motorcycle dispatch company in Amcoats and had like quite a nice warehouse that used to keep the motorbikes in or whatever, and an office. But he was always like up for doing parties at this space, hearing about, New York warehouse parties and things. So I know me and Gerald did a couple of those where, we just set up all the acid stuff and we never had a set list back then. It was just sort of, press go, and it was just sort of follow your nose, And sometimes, you play for like, 2 or 3 hours, which is pretty nuts back then,
You sent me a photograph, and I think it's gone on one of these slides as well. It's a Boardwalk gig that you did in 1988.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Is it the ticket for the Boardwalk Club?
Yeah.
Well, so the first Boardwalk gigs we did, I must say, when I started the engineering course, like 2 weeks after starting the course, I became one of the house engineers at the Boardwalk. So I'd have to do 3 bands a night at the Boardwalk, which is like a baptism of fire, So, and I also used to DJ on the Saturday, and some of Dave Haslam's, he had the Saturday club, and I used to sort of DJ at that. And so the Boardwalk was 9 times out of 10, if anything was going on in Manchester, it'd be there, it was quite easy for us to organise these hip-hop gigs there. And but we were so into the acid thing by the second time we did it that we sort of reversed the order and made it more of a acid house party,
I remember seeing you, I think at the Small Academy, and you supported Inspire Carpets.
Yeah, weird, yeah.
Yeah, and MC Tunes was with you, and he did Dance Yourself to Death.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the reason we got signed to ZTT is because we did Dance Yourself to Death, which was the only tune we had with him at the time, on Snub TV, which was...
I remember that.
Yeah, which is like a tea time programme.
Yeah.
And Paul Morley had seen that, and he came up to see us in regard to that, so...
Was Dave Haslam on that Snub TV?
I'm not sure, I don't remember. They had all kinds of things on there. Yeah. They're all on YouTube now, aren't they?
Yeah. For some reason, I've got it in my head that he did a hip hop bit on it.
Oh, right, yeah. There was a compilation album called Head Over Ears, and it was all... it's to do with Debris magazine. And there was Prince Cool, I think it was. It was like an early Manchester rap artist on that compilation, and Dave Rofe was behind him. Dave Rofe is the manager of the Doves now, kind of thing, but back then he was Biting Tongue's sound engineer for a while, and he was also ran a record label called DFM, Done for Money or something. And I think him and Denise Johnson were an item at that time as well. So I think he managed various other people, So I've lost track now. But I was saying this compilation, it had all kinds of Biting Tongues was on there. It was a little snapshot of mid-80s Manchester. And that's what made it kind of an interesting sort of weird compilation. But it was I remember thinking that's almost the earliest Manchester hip-hop thing that I know about anyway.
I think the first one I went to was the mixed finals at Hacienda.
Oh, right. Okay.
And Leaky Fresh won it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. O&D was the best one, but
right.
Leaky Fresh had loads of mates.
You see, when Darren and Andrew, who were shortly to be in 808 State, big hip-hop heads and into all the breakdancing thing, breaking glass and all those people kind of thing, they were 10 years younger than me, and that was their thing. They used to go to Wembley to see the Street Sounds Electro Festival and things like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been quite young doing that. It must have been about 16 or something. But the 808 State had this sort of breadth of ages and background, sort of different musical backgrounds, you know, that made it quite a diverse thing. Made it quirky.
Quirky, yeah.
I
love that photograph.
Yeah, that's
Dave Booth, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's Martin behind the counter.
Yeah.
Front 242. That's a Hit Squad poster there.
He doesn't get the credit, does he, Dave Booth?
He was a stalwart DJ. Yeah, he was sort of like DJing for years and years. What was his main club? Was it off Deansgate? What was that one?
Well, he started at Pips, didn't he?
Oh, right.
Yeah. And when he played First Joy Division record, didn't he? Peter Hook handed it him.
At Pips.
Yeah. And I feel like Isadora's was a big one for him.
Yeah.
But then he did Club Garlands, I think, in Liverpool. He did that for a long time.
Oh, he did Liverpool stuff. Yeah.
But he was around for a long
lovely
time.
bloke, you know, always sort of good to have a chat with and that. But I mean, that shop was just full of DJs all the time, you know what I mean? All the pecking order for getting the right records was insane, you know. Martin would do people bags all the time, leaving behind the counter. I remember when we were doing recording with Bernard Sumner and stuff for that XL album. And, you know, he'd do Bernard a bag every couple of weeks, you know. And he was like, you know, expanding the interest all over the place, you know what I mean? And it made it the place to be, you know, the Eastern Bloc shop, you know. Plus, early on, we had we started the radio show on Sunset 102. Yeah. And, you know, the shop sponsored the radio program, so they gave them all the latest top 10 or whatever. And, you know, everyone taped that show. Yeah. And went immediately back to the shop with the cassettes. And you didn't have to describe it in bleeps and take me higher quotes and things, you know. You could just take in the cassette. And it was a perfect loop, you know. And but obviously, like, Darren and Andrew were perfect on that radio show, you know. I think the first show, all four of us did it, and it was a bit of a car crash, you know. And so, yeah, they had natural chemistry, and they were absolutely brilliant at it, you know. It's like, it was, and they're all, of course, on the internet now. They're all on YouTube. People have been collating them all. There's hours and hours of it, you know. Yeah, but it kind of glued, it was a bit of glue in Manchester at that point, you know, for the dance music thing, you know. Every Tuesday night, there used to be like circles of cars up in Oldham, you know. You're always meeting people, you know, like my son's, you know, in the playground at school, you know, sort of like Asian ladies who you think would never be ravers kind of thing, was all like, Sunset 102, Tuesday night, you know, they're all in these car circles up in Oldham, up on the hills and all that, you know.
I thought it was really cool as well how some of the DJs, they got paid in records. So like Jay Reardon, he didn't get a wage, did he? He just got paid in records.
Oh yeah, I imagine the accounting system was quite sort of abstract at the shop. I couldn't possibly say, but you know.
I didn't realise, like, as I'm going back doing the videos, I forgot who worked there. I forgot that Justin Robertson worked there. Oh yeah,
Justin, Richard Hector Jones was there. Tom from the Chemical Brothers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's in there. I sent you a photo today, didn't you? It was all like a gathering outside Eastern Bloc. I think it was from the Face magazine. Yeah. Yeah, and he's in that. Yeah. And Laurent Garnier. And
there's a video on YouTube, isn't there, when he's in the shop.
He introduces the shop,
Yeah.
It was the accumulated knowledge in the shop became huge, you know. But originally that shop, we always used to see it as being quite, you know, it had quite a gothy side to it as well. You know, it had quite there was a big section on Belgium New Beat, which was like, you know, it was a bit of a mystery to us what that was. You know, we didn't, you know, it was just kind of hard and sort of pumping. But there was places in Manchester that used to play that stuff, like the Brick House, wasn't there? So,
yeah, and I remember getting the Dung 4 cassette from Eastern Bloc.
What's that?
The Inspiral Carpets. Oh,
right, okay. Yeah, they were always associated with the shop because the shop funded their they were on, what was that label they were on? Anyway, the shop funded one of their singles called Joe. And again, that was one of my first production jobs.
Did you work on that?
Yeah, I produced that record, up in Bury at Square One Studios, And that was, that was a baptism of fire as well, because it was kind of, I'd never done a proper band in a proper studio with that particular desk and all that. It was all kind of terrifying to me at first, but they're such nice lads, it was quite easy. One of the icebreakers actually was like Noel Gallagher was their roadie at the time, kind of thing. And I actually used to be the postman in Burnage, and I was their postman. And he just burst in and was like, "Fucking hell, postman twat!" So it was. Manchester was all kind of blurry. It's so friendly, isn't it? In terms of. You didn't discriminate between genres and things at that point. I was just looking to build experience. I was kind of sometimes a spirit would get like cabaret bands in, and the first time I ever saw a TR-909 drum machine was with a cabaret band, and it was elaborately programmed to follow verses and choruses, and with the 303, some people had bought that equipment and done the thing that the Japanese people thought they were going to do with it, and that just sent me, that was a bizarre one. But there was another band up from Oldham called Asia Fields as well that I ended up doing, and I'd try and pull them over to the electronic dark side quite often. We did like the odd B side where we'd MIDI it up and they'd do their thing over the top of it. But plus we used to get taken down to, as 808 States Records got played on John Peel, we got interest from London off various people who wanted to get involved and get managers. So one of the guys who ended up been managing the Orb came down, and he took us to London a few times, and I ended up sitting in on some sessions with the KLF. Went to the KLF's house, which was like they were doing this ABBA record at the time, sampling.
KLF.
Yeah, and they're literally like that massive sort of Victorian house in round Brixton area, and literally in the living room they had that police car, and it's like. It was like some sort of magician's puzzle as to how the hell they got the police car in the house. I couldn't figure it out. They must have taken the bay window completely out or something to get it in, but it was there in the living room. And the studio was up in a tiny sort of bedroom upstairs, one of the upstairs bedrooms, with all this Oberheim synths and all these samplers and things. And then I went another time and they were doing Grim Up North.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was a fabulous record. They were doing that they were mixing that down in a proper studio. And they went round. I'd done a few remixes for Youth, who was involved with the Orb at the time, the guy bass player from Killing Joke. And I did a record called Naked in the Rain with him, which became like a big international disco floor filler.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, and this was done in Bury.
Yeah.
Bury's got a lot to answer for. It was a really good studio in Bury. And anyway, Youth took us around to, I think it was his mother's house in Battersea somewhere, Putney maybe. And it was like a cottage, and they had this studio set up in the upstairs there, and I've still got, I think it crops up on here, still a cassette of Little Fluffy Clouds that they were just messing about with at the time. It was like the little project they were doing at the time, and it's dead like I've still got that cassette, and it's like that north-south thing became, people talk about this north-south divide, but it wasn't my experience. It was like the scene was spreading everywhere from, Scotland, and we were suddenly, after being almost trapped in Manchester till I was 30, I was suddenly sort of like my world widened through the music, I mean, I'd never been on an airplane or been abroad or anything like that, well, maybe Holland or something, but all of a sudden, the music started rebounding around the world. And I think John Peel had a lot to do with it, really. There was never a record we put out that he didn't champion. So, and he actually used to come in Central Clothing Sandwich Bunker and do...
John Peel did?
Yeah. Because he'd come and do all the record shops. Alison Bell used to be his go-to girl in Manchester, take him around the record shops. I think she was like a plugger or something. I think she worked for Tony Michaelides, who was like a record plugger in Manchester. So he'd come and do all the record shops, and then he'd sit in my cafe in the late in the afternoon, and people would bring him records. And, he'd chat to people and stuff. And that's how we got our record on there. We gave it him there, so.
Mandy, we both know Mandy, don't we? Wiggers.
Wiggers, yeah. I met her on that course, on the recording course.
Oh, is that how you know each other?
Well, yeah, she was on that recording course. And then I discovered that we lived 3 doors apart on Dickinson Road, yeah.
All right.
And on the other side of, also on that block, Manny lived on that block, 2 doors up.
Wow, that's a kill street.
And John Ronson, the writer, he lived in the same block of flats as, I say block of flats, they're like just bed sits or whatever,
She said that she walked into your house one day and Bjork was there. And she was
yeah. When this was later on, this is beyond 1989.
Yeah.
You're going beyond the boundaries.
Getting carried away.
Well, there was when we first met Bjork. Yeah, she was over in. She used to come and stay at my house all the time. And that's why we ended up, working on stuff before debut, really. But basically the stuff that became debut. That period, but we wrote Army of Me and Modern Things in Rusholme, in a terraced house that belonged to Phil Kirby. Phil Kirby was an ex-drummer of Biting Tongues, and he was also in this band Yargo.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah. Yargo were a bit of a forgotten. Some people really, really loved them, and they were like on the verge of being one of the biggest bands from Manchester around about 1987.
Yeah.
They were signed to London Records, and they were on the cover of Enemy and all this kind of thing. They did the music to The Other Side of Midnight. Yeah. And in that band was Paddy Steer as well, who I've had a continuous musical relationship with him over for years and years. Amazing creative force. Yeah. So Yargo. Phil is a bit of an unsung hero in the Manchester music scene. He's behind so many records and nurturing new musicians and that. He did all like that Mr. Scruff first album and stuff, Yeah. He's, somebody should know. If you get him talking, he'll never stop. It's like, but somebody should, I think he's a fascinating character. It's well worth documenting. Yeah.
What was it like playing on Top of the Pops?
Oh yeah, I mean it was like a rite of passage, Top of the Pops, isn't it? I mean, it's the sort of thing where when you used to go to the careers office in Stockport and you go in and it's like, what do you want to do? It's like, I want to do music, and it's like, no, here's a printing job, and it's like, it's like, what do you want to do? I want to do music, and they just take the piss out of you. You know what I mean? So, to get on Top of the Pops, and I just used to think of my careers advisor at that point and go, yeah. It was like, a validation that was worth a lot,
Yeah. That was a top 10 hit, wasn't it? It was really big at the time.
We were on Top of the Pops about 8 times.
Was you?
Yeah. Yeah, there was more than those ones.
I'm trying to think back, but then
there's all those. There's 2 MC Tunes ones, that got on Top of the Pops. In Your Face, Cubic, Army of Me. I was on with, There's loads of stuff, And sometimes you're on multiple times. It's like every time you went on, it's like, oh bloody Jimmy Somerville again. He lived there. I'm sure he had a bed in the corner or something. He was always on. And I'm haunted by that Lambada tune. There was always like, is it going up? Is it coming down? Instead, like another instrumental hit, get out of the way, that kind of thing.
When I did a video with someone we both know, Jane Winterbottom, and she said that she told me a story about the saxophone in Spirit.
Yeah, so when you know a thing or two about Biting Tongues, and again, I'm going to play some stuff from Spirit in 1988 and 9. We were doing an electronic record, but it all had horns on. Biting Tongues had half of... We used to rehearse in Out of the Blue, which is now in that square in Ancoats. It was like a studio that was there for years and years, and rehearsal rooms. And they also used to make AMEC desks there. It had a soldering room. Dave Rofe, Dove's manager, he worked in the soldering room with all these sort of middle-aged ladies that used to sort of like, sort of put him on a pedestal. And that place, it was so many things came through that studio. You'd been there one day, and I remember Bizarre Inc. doing playing with knives in there just on a Saturday afternoon. Every time you went in, there was something going on. Sorry, I've lost the plot.
The saxophone.
Oh yeah, so right, Biting Tongues. Like we had this group, and Paddy and Phil, who were in Yargo, were the rhythm section of Biting Tongues. So we shared these musicians, and suddenly they got signed by London Records, and we found ourselves without a rhythm section. But by that point, we had the drum machines and the sequencers and everything then. So we started to make a record using the technology. And so it wasn't unusual to play a saxophone over an electronic record in our world. But we had this track, and it definitely needed something melodic on it, because it was just kind of, it had a great groove and great atmosphere. But I remember one Saturday morning, Howard, who's here tonight, we're going to watch his film in a bit. He was a saxophone player in Biting Tongues, and he'd left his sax overnight, and I just picked it up, and all it needed was a very simple melodic line. So I did that. I think I wrote it the night before, and then on the Saturday, a load of people turned up from the shop. It was like, maybe about 15 people crammed into the studio at that point, and it's a tiny little place. With one of those, it always smelled of oxtail soup, because it had a clicks machine in the corner. You know what I mean? It smelled like the swimming baths after, and it was sweaty as well. It was just sort of like it hadn't seen air in a decade. Such a sweaty little place. But I remember that distinctly one Saturday. It almost seemed like a bit of an event when we put the sax on that. I know Simon from Vinyl Exchange. He was there. He was a witness, kind of thing. And I think he worked in Eastern Bloc as well. Everyone worked in Eastern Bloc. Then he later worked in Decoy Records. It was all the Venn diagrams. That's the crazy about your YouTube channel. It's like every time I'm watching it, it's like another bit of the Venn diagram all filling in. And it's like the interconnectedness of Manchester is incredible. And going back to that Central Clothing sandwich bunker, the shop assistant was Carol Morley, Paul Morley's sister, who later went on to make the Alcohol Years. I don't know if people have seen that film, but it is a perfect snapshot of this mid-period Manchester again that leads on to the rave era. It's like it's just as interesting as the rave thing, kind of thing. Different drugs maybe.
Yeah.
In that case, alcohol. But it's a fascinating portrait of how Manchester worked at that point, And all this stuff got brought to the table with early 808 State. Yeah. So when you listen to those records, and we are trying to ape Chicago Acid House, it's like that was definitely a starting point, because you couldn't get these records too much. They had these compilations, like acid compilations, and some of the quality was a bit iffy. you know, some of it was great, and some of it was like, oh, skip that, skip this. You know, there was no, there was a randomness to it that you wanted to kind of, you wanted the crazy stuff. Sometimes, like Martin gave me this Gherkin Jerks record, and it's like, oh, that's fucking mental, you know. And you wanted it that crazy, and it's like, turn up the crazy, you know. And that's Newbuild for you. It's kind of like layer after layer after layer, you know. And it's kind of, it was too much for some people. The almost like the dense tapestry of what it is. It's kind of what makes it in a way, you know. A lot of sort of cross rhythms and add another 101. There's like, you know, 101s with these sort of little sequency synthesizers, and we had 3 on the go, and you know, it's too many really. But that's what kind of makes it, is gnarly and tangled, and yeah.
So we've hit 40 minutes now.
All right.
Yeah. Should we open up to the crowd or?
Yeah.